Off. Thank you everybody for joining us for our Wednesday Zoom and Learn with our presenter today, Mary Jane Morris with Granite Escrow, who is going to be covering the new 2021 laws that really pertain to real estate. So without further ado, Mary Jane, floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. For those who don't know me, who haven't been attending, I'm Mary Jane Morris. I'm the VP of Sales for Granite Escrow, and specifically for the Territory Riverside County area. I was brought in specifically as a non-competing broker because I've always have been. Anytime you feel like you want to check the MLS, you can see that I don't do any deals. But for 40 years of my career, I've been handling transactions and closing them from everywhere from the TC level to an escrow. I was an escrow officer for 20 years, and then I've been a broker for the last 20 years. So they brought me in specifically to bring you guys new solutions, real solutions, where escrow has to say stop. We can make the usual suggestions through me because I carry all the credentials, E&O, corporation, all that sort of stuff that makes it safe for me to give you general advice and the type that would not include tax law or legal stuff like you do. So today, Tommy and I had a little pre-meeting about this class. Due to the amount of material we're going to cover, we're asking you to write your questions into the chat. Tommy's going to monitor the chat, and when things come up in a repeat way, he will catch my attention and talk about it. When we're completely done, or if Tommy feels like it's very important, he will stop me and get back to it. So Tommy, may I please have the slideshow from C.A.R?
Yep.
All right, this is our agenda today. We're going to be talking about common interest developments. We're going to be talking about foreclosure sales, a new department from what I knew in my day as the Department of Corporations changed to the Department of Business Operations a few years ago, and now they've changed the name again. We'll talk about that as we go. The homestead protections have been expanded. I want to talk to you about that if you're not a corporation yourself personally, how to protect yourself. The fire home hardening disclosures that are coming. This is a new from the wildfires in California. We're going to talk about Prop 19 and how that replaces the other props and its benefits. We're going to talk about some independent contractor stuff, the red cap cleanup. We're going to go over the Tenant Relief Act moratorium. And next slide, please, Tommy. So as of January 1, condo associations and mobile home parks are not allowed to have a no renter policy anymore. They have to allow no less than 25% of their units available in their community to allow renters. I have one right now where I'm helping an agent do some grant deeds because their daughter can't stay in their condo because she's not on title. So these are the kind of things that, and this includes, Carson, to make a point of telling you that this includes mobile homes as well. All mobile homes and HOAs have to comply with this as of January 1, whether or not they've had a chance to update their CC&Rs or whether or not they've heard about it, okay? I want to point down that in most of the slides I'm going to show you in the bottom right corner is the actual bill number that you can pull up directly off of Google if you need to give somebody a copy of the actual signed law. HOAs do have to, I'm going to talk about short-term rentals in just a second. Catherine, I see your post pop up. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So all HOAs do have to amend by December 31st next year, but that doesn't stop them from having to comply with allowing tenants up to 25, no less than 25%, no more than 25%. They cannot claim any fee for doing it. They cannot claim any share of the rent. And for any willful violation, the penalty is $1,000 per. Right? So that's the first one. Next slides. So some of us have wondered whether we're going to have even a portion of a short sale market again due to the forbearance and the people losing their jobs and the high unemployment and that sort of stuff. So the law tightens some of that as well. So once a bank forecloses and they offer it for sale, the people who have rights to get a bid accepted ahead of anybody else are tenants, owner occupants. Now, I want to mention that that does not mean the owner occupant that was foreclosed on. That means if they intend to own or occupy it as a primary residence, or a nonprofit right that has that focuses on reducing homelessness in California. I wanted to tell you that these people will have the first right of refusal. The tenant and a tenant offer will win over any other bidder. The only exception to that is if they make a cash offer, the tenant or owner occupied will be asked to match the cash price, but they will not lose the first right of refusal. They must make their bid in the first 45 days. And none of these include the right to inspect the property before you make your bid. You do have to maybe drive by or hope it's vacant and be able to slide in the backyard or something like that, but you're not going to be able to properly inspect these to make a bid. C.A.R wants you to notice at the bottom line of this slide right here that when you look at the trustee that is foreclosing, they each have an internet website and they will have all the dates for the various properties, and you will be able to track what's going on and make your bids at the individual trustees' websites. Okay. All right. Now, as I mentioned, the DOC many years ago, while I was being a broker and not in escrow, changed their name to the Department of Business Operations or Oversight or something. I joke with old timers like Sam and Wendy and a few of us that I just go on calling things what I call them. So I called it the DOC all along, and I still call it a HUD, even though we know it's a settlement statement or closing settlement statement. That's it. So not only did they change their name this time, but they have become a watchdog consumer protection authority. And they are talking about that they are going to, I want to read this closely, so I bring it up to my face. They are going to regulate, investigate, and enforce consumer financial protection and offer anybody who's offering any sort of financial services like PACE loans, things like that. This is going to be who's or Hero Loans. This is who's oversighting. This department reminds you that if your license is hung with the Department of Real Estate or you have a loan license, you're still going to be oversight. Your oversight's still going to be with your normal service provider. So one of the things that they put on their agenda was a 6-word item that I've asked a guest speaker, and I'd like to introduce Sam Markham. I think you guys can see her there in the corner. So one of the things that they're talking about for the people who either use a TC or are a TC is, and I want to read the exact 6 words. The agenda for next year includes unlicensed TCs acting as independent contractors. So we don't know what that means. C.A.R had no answer for me as to what investigative matters that's going to be. But many TCs started out as unlicensed. Very often there's somebody's daughter or something that was given a chance, or a friend of a friend or something. So very briefly, because I called Sam twice now about this. We do not want to cause a panic in the TC world. So I would love to have Sam take a minute and share her thoughts of the impact of that 6-word sentence. Tommy, can you let her? Oh, she's
I got it. Thanks, Mary Jane. Just quick background about me. I'm actually a licensed realtor who has been a TC for 17 years. I've done over 6,500 transactions, and yes, I am somebody's daughter who got sucked into all this. My mom has been in real estate for over 40 years. My concern is that this is going to be something that's going to have everybody freak out before we have any information. So the biggest issue I see, and I've run into previously with different escrows, is that typically commissions can only be paid to brokers. And when TC fees are classified as commissions, there have been issues previously if you do not have a DRE number to have that commission paid. A lot of time, I have had a few files where escrows have had to direct the agent to pay me outside of escrow. I'm thinking it's leaning that way. However, I personally have been a huge advocate for every TC to be licensed. How are we supposed to be discussing forms and such with all y'all without this? And I think it may be leaning that way. We don't have enough information yet. And Mary Jane and I just wanted to let you know, so as you start to hear rumbles, or if you work with an unlicensed TC or concerns and things like that, that we can be ahead of it. Part of the goal of this is to work with the DBO and find out what they're asking and what they're requiring, because is this just a way to make some more money, have some more classes required, or is there a deeper level? So that's what I'm here for. I'll have my info posted in the chat if anybody has any questions. I actually have run a TC group in San Diego for over 10 years now, and I was assisted with starting the national TC organization that has morphed into the, I can't even do all their initials, it also includes assistants. So I'm all about us being as educated as possible to help you do what you do best, and let us know what we can do to help, but we are definitely aware of this and trying to stay on top of it.
I wanted to mention that some of the things that are on the table that we don't know are we still going to be able to put TC fees on contracts? Are they going to have to be employees of the broker? Where is this heading? Now, Sam and I live and breathe this stuff because we have to take care of a lot of people whose livelihoods are made on this. And for years, we have run down every scare we've heard, every iota of information that we can come up with. A realtor friend of mine even paid $9,000 to a well-known attorney to try to get to the bottom of whether TC fees on contracts and things are legal or unlegal or illegal. So we know for a fact that they are neither illegal nor are there penalties for them at this time. But when I saw that line, I couldn't help but dial Sam and say that it may be on deck now to start dealing with TCs. If you're unlicensed, you may want to think about getting licensed. That'd be a good start. So I didn't want to take that one very far, except to say that I know we have TCs on here. We want you to know we care about you. We know many of you as agents rely on your TCs, and we want you to know that we'll be watching that, and we would be the first ones out with any news. That I should have given Sam a better send-up. She's really outstanding. She runs a group of about 1,100 TCs, and I'm very grateful that you were available, Sam, to chat with us a little bit today. I wanted other people who knew you well, other TCs on here, to see that that one of our leaders is on it. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Next slide, please, Tommy.
Yep.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Homestead, the Homestead Act, a certain amount of money in the equity of your home is protected if you were to have something simple like a car accident where it exceeded something horrible, where it exceeded the limits of your insurance, or you were uninsured for some reason, or all of the many things that we worry about when we don't do forms exactly right or something like that, inadvertent negligence, where a certain percentage is assigned to the agent individually outside of, sometimes outside of their E&O even. So I wanted to remind you again that Sam and Tracy and Tommy and I are available to help you produce the homestead agreement that you can record on your property. If you are operating as a real estate professional without a corporation and your home is not homesteaded, you're missing a vital protection that would be very great for you. And so this particular year, they have increased the amount of equity that can be protected from up to sales price up to $600,000 or $300,000, whichever is greater. Remember, homestead protection does not apply to consumer debt. So If you have a stack of credit cards because of your COVID thing and you get a lot of judgments, they will not be able to take your house for them. I only have one personal note to mention on this. At the very, very end of our dad's career, he got involved with a group that turned out was insolvent and was not able to continue. And they brought a case, and in court, my dad didn't even think of it. He had filed a homestead many years ago, but the court said, if there's not enough equity in the home, and this is very important for you, with a homestead, a certain amount is protected. And if there isn't that amount to take, they don't even allow the sale. Okay, so the court, they stopped the sale of a family home because of a homestead, because there wasn't enough equity in the house to satisfy it anyway. So they won't do a partial settlement on a homestead. Now, this part I don't have completely clear because I don't have a reference for you on this, but the C.A.R attorney who taught this class said that in the case of judgments on homes, that they, especially if you claim the homeowner exemption credit on your property taxes, that they would apply a homestead protection act to you whether or not you filed. But he said very specifically that filing would make it without a doubt. It's a very simple document. It's a single page document. There's a couple of choices whether you use a form that says you're single or a form that says you're married, but other than that, the homestead's very simple. So, yeah. I'm not sure if I have a question, but I'll let Tommy trigger me if I do.
All right, perfect. No, I just think somebody was off mute and just getting some background noise.
All right. So we're getting a new disclosure. And by the way, thanks for reminding me. No, and the answer to the question for Shannon is no. If your property is held in a revocable family trust, your homestead still stands. And that same answer is going to be for another question that will be coming up in another law. So we are getting a new form called the Home Hardening Disclosure, and it becomes January 2001. It will be specifically for areas of high or very high fire areas. And what they have discovered is that homes as much as a mile away from a fire, an ash will get in. In fact, I noticed on this slide projection that they didn't give me the other two pictures that they show. But those little wired holes that we have at the bottom or top of our garage, or a certain type of roof, what do they call those roofs, Tommy? The wood shingle, shake.
Yeah,
right?
shaker roof, shake roof.
If you have those types of things, your home may be in danger of burning as much as a mile away from the actual fire, from the embers. So if you're in a high fire or very high fire area, you're going to need to do this disclosure. Also, if it was built before 2010. So built before 2010 in a high or very high fire, they will have the same rights of cancellation as they have with the regular TDS. There's going to be some new questions on the new question on the TDS as well. We only have red line versions of the new forms yet, so I cannot show you the new form, but I will be back December. I had the date down here. I'll get to it here.
December 9th.
Yes, I'm sorry, Tommy, there was a slide. We forgot to.
Yep. Yeah, it's December 9th.
Can you skip ahead a slide? Or is it froze?
No, I can go ahead.
Okay. Residential 1 to 4, same cancellation rights. There's another slide right behind this one. Thanks, Wendy, for the reminder. Now, this poses the question whether it could come up on a request for repair, because they are calling this fire-resistant retrofits. So at the top of the purchase contract, where we often have that box check that says the seller will eat any retrofits, general government, blah, 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 blah. And Most of the time we know that doesn't apply. If your home is in one of these categories, you could wind up with either a request for repair for this issue or a discussion as to whether the home needs to be retrofitted for these things. And then they laid out some of the rain gutters because pine needles fill up in the rain gutters. There's a whole selection there. So that form will be out with our forms update next month. There's also going to be, next slide, please, or maybe I did it. There's going to be a new a booklet that'll come out. And I'll bet, and this will remind me to say to you that the NHD companies are very good at sliding these sort of things into. So where do you find out if your home is in a high, very high or very high fire? Page 1 of your NHD report will say whether that's true. So this is again one of those things that you should order sooner rather than later, so that you know what your situation is with the. And then this booklet will obviously be available electronically, and most likely will be added to the list of booklets that every NHD company sends out with in their cover letter. So we are getting a new booklet as well to go with our many. I don't know, what do we got, Sam? 200 pages of booklets at this point? Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of slides that show the kinds of maps, but you and I are going to, the next couple of slides, Tommy, show, oh, this is the language that's going into the TDS. Thanks for reminding me. If you have eaves or soffit for vents and openings, excess of 1/8, roof coverings, combustible landscaping, single pane.
Just explain what
Yeah.
that was. Okay. But if you look,
All right, hold on. We got somebody who is not on mute, so let me.
You're getting about really high 270, almost 300 on the model.
If you can hear me and you are not on mute, would you?
What does that mean?
Tom, can you mute them?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Now I'm ready to talk about, so the next couple slides show the types of maps you see in the NHD reports. Tommy? Oh, I found it interesting that C.A.R used the NHD disclosure where a seller tells you whether he's in a high fire zone. I personally don't rely on the C.A.R form for my NHD information. That's why we have third parties do it. Those maps are constantly changing. So I don't recommend this form to be used, neither does Sam, for these.
It's so much liability. Do not use that form.
Yeah, I do. It does put it squarely back on the seller, but if it conflicts with the NHD and we didn't notice, it could be simple negligence for you. There's on purpose negligence, and then there's simple negligence where you error or omitted something. So I want to talk about Prop 19 now. These are the couple of maps that show the high flyer zones and what it looks like, but you're not going to be getting it there. You're going to be getting it from me. So the good news about Proposition 19 is it was supported by the California Association of Realtors and by the National Association of Realtors. And for those of you who are familiar with its predecessors, Proposition 60, 60, and 90, this was an opportunity for a senior citizen to sell their primary residence, move somewhere where they need to be for health or happiness reasons, and retain the tax benefits that they had from the many years they were in the home. They literally, when my parents left their home, their taxes were $400 a half. She moved that to her new mobile home, and that's what she pays on her mobile home at this time. So the old rules, Proposition 60 only applied to only said it was okay for the counties who were willing to do it. And then Proposition 90 had certain counties that would allow it to be done. Proposition 19 replaces both of those. And for your information, both Proposition 60 and 90 will sunset, meaning they will close out at the same time as the April 1 that Proposition 19 becomes available. There are some additional benefits to it that you can do. You can transfer anywhere in the state, regardless of the location, regardless of the price of the replacement property. You're going to be able to buy up if you need to, because very often the price compared to what you bought it for several years ago is going to put you in a position of having to buy a more expensive home, even if it's not necessarily bigger or better than what you had. It needs to be accomplished within 2 years of the original primary residence being sold. You can do it up to 3 times. So if the first property didn't work for you, you can do it again.
That's a big adjustment right there, because Prop 60 and 90 was a single time.
Right.
So this allows you up to 3. And, you know, keep in mind, 60 and 90 was up to 2 years out as well. So if you have, you know, a client who was affected by the fires, or who is disabled, or who is over 55, or multiples of those, some are over 55 and disabled, and they moved within the last couple of years as a client, you may want to reach out, touch base with them, and let them know that they can potentially transfer their previous tax rate if they hadn't done so already, especially.
Well, I have to stop you there just for a second, Tommy. They are the C.A.R attorney was very clear to say that if your sale, first piece of your sale, happened on the watch of Proposition 60 or 90, you're going to be stuck with those rules.
It's still the same if they haven't used 60 or 90 before,
Okay.
right? For 55 and over. And the fact that if they hadn't taken, for instance, it would hold true to that unless 60 and 90 isn't available in the particular county in which they moved.
Right. This was and this has a broader scope, as that it also covers severely handicapped, as Tommy said, and the people who were forced out by fires.
So a question was asked, does it reset after each transaction? No, each person that falls in this category of over 55 or disabled now will have the opportunity to transfer a tax rate up to 3 times, period, meaning in their lifetime.
And this is where that question that was asked earlier, the answer repeats, and it is, if your home is in a revocable family trust, this will apply to you as well.
Right.
The next slide, C.A.R specifically, if I get the next slide, C.A.R specifically said that the attorney said when he did this math, which was the last 2 bullet points here, this math is off. So this is not my math, and I apologize. They are letting you know that if your property is equal or less, the part that does apply though is that if your property is equal or lesser value, they are going to, this law will apply to a portion of it, and you will only pay additional taxes on the difference between, and they gave a little formula here. The formula is probably correct, but he said specifically that his math was wrong. So don't rely on the math there, but there is some potential for a slice of it to be taxed at a normal rate under certain circumstances. Another benefit of Proposition 19, moving on to the next slide, is that this applies to transfer of property from children to grandchildren as well. If it is the family home and it is going to remain in the home and they are going to be the primary residents, they can apply this as well. If the parents are dead, the parents have to be passed for the grandparents to pass it. And that rule was part of the other rule of the first 2 propositions as well. So there's no change there. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, grandchildren can also benefit from retaining the family home taxes as an inducement to get younger people into homes, especially homes where their grandparents want them to have it. And they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford it with a new tax rate. So,
and this is huge, because if they didn't take advantage of Prop 60, 90, or 19 now, and the house was inherited by the son or the children, they would ultimately suffer a reassessment. But if they take advantage of the Prop 19 or Prop 60, 90, that would not take place when they are left that house.
This particular rule only has 1 year to get, 1 year from the passing to take advantage of this. You can't rent it out for a couple of years and get back around to it. It has to be your intention for a family member to take over the family home.
Right.
Let's talk about PACE loans. For all of us realtors, we have been as victimized. Well, that's not fair to say. Many homeowners are victimized by the sale of the power purchase agreements in solar and things where they rent your roof and you think it costs you nothing to put it up there, and you're basically stuck with this arrangement. And I think, Tommy, was it you that we were reading one of them, and the price over the few years was what?
Astronomical. It was a power purchase agreement where it started extremely low for the first like 5 years, but then after 5 years, it would go up 2.9% annually. So what they were paying for power per kilowatt started out low, and then it would go up 2.9% each annual year after 5 years until 20 years. Well, by the time you get to like year 10, you're well beyond like the third tier of Edison. You know what I mean? So it ends up becoming extremely expensive. And unfortunately is that contract doesn't start over when you sell the house. So if they end up selling it to somebody else, they inherited that. And it was a nightmare.
Which circles me back to when we have sloppy or delayed delivery of the purchase agreement as part of the solar agreement as part of the disclosures. When it's not taken seriously, a buyer could accidentally close and claim not to have been disclosed this information it's gonna be bad enough when they were disclosed and they didn't read it. But when we fail to disclose, that's going to be an opportunity for lawsuit. And one of the things C.A.R reminded us is losses are calculated over the life of the mortgage or the life of what's left in the PACE
Right.
loan. So you're not going to get hit. We had an HOA years ago not notify somebody of a special assessment, and the judgment was for $30 a month for 30 years. So while it seemed like it wasn't much at the time, when you did the math times the 30 years, it was quite substantial, making up for it. So that the new division that we have and a new law that has come out requires contracts for these types of loans to be in no less than 12-point type. The homeowner can opt out and choose to sign electronically, but he must sign the opt-out live. He cannot do it by DocuSign. So they want live signatures on these contracts, and they're going to be taking away the convenience of sending a senior that you haven't met, when you're a PACE type salesperson, materials like this without a live signature.
Yeah, I mean, right now there was nobody to really oversee all this, and unfortunately, a lot of these programs are being pushed upon people that are easily persuaded and don't understand. And I mean, perfect example. There was a house in a 55 and over community. It was of 1,100 square feet, and somehow, some way, they were talked into a solar lease, a hero loan, that was $229 a month. I can't fathom, even if they ran their AC 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that their electric bill would be that high in a 1,000 square foot home. But, it's one of those things where now at least there will be somebody overlooking these companies and the contracts in which they're pushing. And hopefully, it will streamline it a bit to where we don't have as many, I'll call it crooks, because that's what it is, crooks out there.
This brings me back to my early comment that I used in the first couple of minutes while we were waiting for everybody to get here. Solar has just been a nightmare. I have so few things in my career that, you just bang your head on the wall. It's not a matter of get somebody on the phone and yell at them anymore. It's can you even get somebody on the phone?
Right.
The one I had to solve yesterday, the message that I left, I said, I've now reached out to your corporate lawyer and your corporate CDO, and nothing but that. 10 minutes later, my paperwork came through the email without even calling me back. So, but that was after, I can't tell you how many phone calls. A year ago or so, we had one where the MLS said that the solar would be paid off at close. So the two agents didn't document that into the purchase agreement. Luckily for us, the seller did note it in the TDS, which was all I had after the fact to prove that they were going to pay it off at all. And the reason that it took us almost 18 months to get that one transferred was because the homeowner felt that her father had been taken advantage of. And she wanted them to undo the contract. She didn't want to give up her rights. She wanted the contract undone. And we wound up helping her getting her with an attorney that would separate out those matters. The transfer was one thing, and the I'm not done with you yet solar company was another thing. So
and that goes for everything on solar contracts, not just Pace and Hero, because all the new builders right now, at least in County of Riverside is mandating that they put some solar on the roof to offset the cost of electricity. These are solar contracts. Even if a new property had it when it was brand new and the original owner is still in the house and they're selling it, there's a solar contract on that property. And, just because they weren't the ones that established it, the builder did, doesn't mean that doesn't have to be disclosed. Twice this week alone, I've heard from agents where they've put in offers and then the counter comes back and it says that the buyer has to assume responsibility of the solar contract. And they're like, what solar contract? It wasn't listed in the MLS, wasn't disclosed anywhere, right? And the responses was like, oh, well, this was part of the new build. Well, it doesn't matter. There's still a solar contract there where that solar company is leasing the space on that roof. So, if there's solar on there, disclose it regardless if it's paid off or it's not. You may not have all the answers for it, but it should be disclosed in the MLS when you take that listing.
So as predicted, we're at 45 minutes, so I'm going to keep moving quickly. I just can't beat to death enough. Pay attention to the solars. Don't advocate to anybody the responsibility of understanding as an agent, whether you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, the duty for understanding what's going on around the solar and what's going to happen. We should be on the appraisals and home inspectors. Like Uber drivers and Instacart drivers, appraisers and home inspectors were confirmed as independent contractors this year, just for those who may also do those tasks as well. The next one is the rent cap cleanup from last year. So last year, the recap was we were allowed to increase the rent no more than 5% plus the CPI. The cleanup here was what CPI and how do you count it? CPI actually stands for, the definition is up here in the corner, a measure of inflation, which involves regularly monitoring the change in price for everyday goods and services. So the new cleanup law has an exact CPI for you to use, which I'll show you on the next slide. It details those metropolitan areas, and it has a 5-month lead time. So if you are outside this lead time, you're stuck with whatever the previous CPI number was. So the example that C.A.R gave you was for LA and Orange County, your rent cap would be limited to 5% plus 0.7%. That's your limit. Riverside plus 2.3, San Diego plus 1.8. The rest of the counties you see there. And this, you might want to save this to your desktop, take a screenshot, save it to your desktop, but this is especially if you do any sort of property management or own rentals, which many of us do. This is the limit and so this was the cleanup from last year. So moving on.
Well, this is big for all you buyers and stuff. A lot of renters, they don't like change, so they stay in the rental because the rent hasn't gone up, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, when it does go up and somebody wants to raise the rent in lieu of almost 10% with inflation and the 5%, you know, that's enough to make them either move into another rental or maybe look at buying. But with a 2.3% cap on that for Riverside, I mean, that's not much when you think about it. You know, somebody's paying, say, $2,000 a month. It's not a whole lot. That may be enough for them to just look at it and say, okay, we'll stay. I mean, you can almost ride out 3 years of rent increases versus 1 year of rent increase, what it used to be.
And then I saw Tommy Taylor's question go by. So yes, for Riverside, it would be 7.3 as of March is the limit. So yes, I'm answering your the questions that I can see pop on the screen and that I can take care of quickly. I will. Moving on to another cleanup portion of the cleanup law was the next slide, there was no definition of what a duplex was. A duplex is a property containing two separate dwellings within a single structure. Okay? The owner occupies one of those units as a principal place of residence. You put in effect the, I'm going to stick to my notes here. It needs to, I don't know what the beginning of the tenancy meant in this case, but the owner continues in occupancy, and this exception for duplexes does apply to both the rent cap and just cause law from last year. There are, I'm going to have it here in a minute, how many exact just cause reasons there are versus fault reasons there are, but duplexes with an owner occupant in one of them is exempt from the rent cap cleanup. All right. So now, when we got to this part of the thing, I kind of dug in and really leaned into my screen and tried to make sure I was getting what they were saying. They are not predicting what we're going to see here as far as how much forbearance and people are going to be needing to do. So they said that some of their laws, a simple sentence in their law that, for instance, the first sentence, loan servicers are required to follow all federal guidelines. Well, yeah, they always were. So how does the CARES Act make it different than what they would have done as a normal course of legal business? They have to follow the guidelines. The line to be, the loan had to be current as of February 1 to apply for forbearance and to receive forbearance. There are now penalties for lenders who won't return your call, don't acknowledge your application, argue with you about COVID. For this law, it does apply to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, and USDA loans. For those who are not federally backed, it will still apply as a similar solution. They must answer you. They must provide the application and a reply. They must they must give you solutions of how you can fix it, what their options are to fix it. Right now, forbearance is 180 days with an opportunity for another 180 days. Avoiding politics completely in this conversation, we really don't know whether the tenant eviction laws and all those sort of things are going to be extended going in, especially since we're surging right now. I don't. So some of these dates may turn out not to be what really happens, but as of this class and as of C.A.R's class last week, this is where we are. So there is a moratorium continuing for foreclosure through 12/31 of this year. And they must be given options from the lender. They have to have one point of contact. You can't get shuffled all over the building. They have to acknowledge your efforts. They have to call you back and reply. And they are fee restricted from making money from the effort it takes to work with you. For for James, who's asking me, are forbearance balanceables allowed to be forgiven? That is a lender by lender situation, depending on the terms of your note and the agreement that you made in your forbearance. They get sometimes, we all heard right at the beginning that some people were getting 6 months just boom, knocked right off. And to never come back again until the end of the loan, when most of us would have sold altogether. So I cannot tell you whether it applies to your particular situation. I can't tell you that we all know that there is some forgiveness available. It's just how it's applied is still not clear. If you're denied, they have to tell you why and what you can do to fix it. Now, this used to apply to any first mortgage holder, but now it's for first mortgage holders that are doing 175 foreclosures or more a year. So for a national company, 175 is nothing a year in foreclosure. So it's pretty, the other thing is that you have to have there's going to be an arm's length affidavit that you are not representing that you're trying to cover somebody else. Similar to this, if y'all have the same last name, is there some shenanigans going on here? And then one of the most important things is these people do not have to prove that they had COVID. They must simply declare it and sign a COVID document saying that they've declared it. They do not have to prove it to get forbearance. There is an example that is coming up where they do have to prove it, but this is not the one.
That would be if your pay was affected because you caught COVID. But if your pay was affected because you lost your job just due to COVID, meaning you never caught it or what have you, they look at that slightly different, because you got to show that it is a hardship, that you did lose your job or your pay was cut in half or what have you.
If you pull up the actual AB, it is saying that a simple declaration that you were COVID affected is going to be sufficient for applying for forbearance. So I want to make sure that it doesn't. I think it's to encourage people to speak to their lenders, even if they're not sure that they would get or be benefit or have the rights to forbearance.
Right. Okay.
There's one more correction that we all thought was important, which was small landlords, the person who owns one or two, that owns one or two, or frankly 3 or less properties, and those properties can have no more than 4 units on them. So a total of 12 units on 3 or less properties are exempt from forbearance situations, and there will be a more traditional settling for them than you can do at the national level. So now I want to talk about the Tenant Relief Act. I'm doing pretty good. I think
Am I on the right slide? Small landlords.
Say overview right there. Thank you. So the tenant, first of all, in the top right-hand corner there is the law itself and a link directly to it so that you can examine your individual situation. This is the Tenant Relief Act applies to rent from 3/1 of 20 to 1/31, so including January of the first of the year here. Owners will not be able to evict with certain exceptions on the basis of non-payment if they declare a COVID-related financial hardship. There is an exception that if the rent became due between 9/1 and 1/31 as part of the process, they can demand at least 25% of the rent to be paid. The tenant will still owe the rest of the rent, and the landlord can sue in small claims court regardless of the amount due, but he cannot start an unlawful detainer action to collect unpaid rent. Also, the 3-day notice that we're used to giving when somebody doesn't pay the rent has been extended to a 15-day notice and must be preceded by the COVID warning notice. So for those of you who do some property management, a blanket COVID disclosure should go out across all your properties and become a permanent part of your file, so that if you get to the 15-day, if you have to give somebody a 15-day notice instead of the 3-day pay or quit, you have met the obligation of warning them that there are COVID protections in place for them. Residential tenants who are natural persons, meaning there actually has to be humans. It can't be held by an LLC and the trust is holding a vacant property for some, or an LLC is holding a vacant property. It must be a natural person. It also protects mobile homeowners in a mobile home park. Commercial and vacation rentals, 30 days or less, are excluded from protection where rent was due prior to 3/1 and after 1/31. So commercial and vacation rentals assume a certain, on the commercial side, a certain sophistication that you know what you're doing in your entire business, and your vacation rentals imply a luxury or an unnecessary rent situation as opposed to the roof over your head. Let's see. The next one, the time periods. Again, the COVID declaration is sufficient. They still have to sign the declaration saying that they are declaring a COVID situation. We talked about the 25% of, can't read my own writing here, give me 1 second. Few notices. Okay, I covered that. So as of February 1, for now, as of February 1, 2021, the regulation for this C.A.R. Act will expire. And no additional paperwork, and we all go back to the regular rules, providing that we don't have an extension of this due to the surge or change in our political landscape. Okay. There are, if you look, and for those, for Miss Wendy, who's asking if there's a COVID-19 disclosure, I believe it's either the same COVID one that we use for purchase contracts because it doesn't have a contract date at the top, or if you pull up, if you categorize and use it forms and look at your tenant, either your tenant documents, or for those of you who don't know, you have a pull down library in your zip forms, and there's a COVID library in there. So it's most likely in your rental stuff or in your COVID stuff in zip forms. We'll take a peek and get an answer to that. So one of the ones, yes, I'd be most comfortable with the one that we already had for several months now, declaring a COVID situation that we could use. And if you'll notice at the top, it doesn't have a contract date and all that. It just is a general use disclosure. Tommy's asking a question. I'm going to leave that to Tommy to look at that and get back to me because it's a longer question than I can do off the top of my head. So
I was answering a question. There was a question that just said he has an investor that is looking to potentially sell off some of his houses. Is it okay to still give 60-day notices? You could give a 60-day notice to a tenant as long as they're willing to move and find suitable housing, etc. You could run into an issue though. Just know that if they don't find suitable housing and they don't find a place to move, trying to force them out, you could run into issues because it will fall under the C.A.R. Act.
I personally participated in negotiations this year alone to buy a tenant out. They got $5K, they got their entire deposit, they got their pet deposit, everything to get them out. So, and we still had to back the escrow up 30 days for them to find a property and be willing to go. But they walked with $8,000, one of them. He had been behind on his rent. He didn't have even a COVID situation. He was just all the time behind on his rent. So it costs us $8,000 to get them out right now. Tenancy is a big deal. You know. I want to talk about high income tenants. Sam's posting a quick summary of the COVID forms. Thank you. I was actually going to ask her to do it, but I should have known she'd jump on it for me. Thank you, Sam. So in the chat, she's posted the list of the COVID forms that are available. High income tenants and can we move on to the next slide?
Yep.
High income tenants are people who have 130% of median household income in the county, but no less than 100K. The tenant is high income. They must provide objectively verifiable written document. And so if you're renting $1 million property to somebody and they claim COVID, they do have to provide proof of financial distress in the form of tax return, W-2, pay stubs, letter from employment, unemployment insurance, any and all of the above necessarily to settle it.
Mm-hmm.
When they do settle, they do have a sliding scale for the number of children that are in the home, by the way. So if you have a situation where, I think we all went through that in the short sale market, how many children were displaced, and how heartbreaking that was, and how often there were families that had many children that were in that situation. So that's a nice, and then there, again, when you're serving the 15-day notice, there's a high income box on the notice that must be checked to make it official. All right. Yeah, I'm closing in on it here. So now I'm at the just cause. The state extended just cause. There are 11 fault reasons a person could be evicted, and there are 4 no fault reasons a person could be evicted, and they are all temporarily suspended right now while we go. They apply to the but the part that I thought was more interesting here too, as it applies to us, if the tenant is buying the home, this now closes the lease out with the close of escrow. They are not subject to lease negotiations for failing to continue the lease. There is nothing left owed on the lease. If you sell your property to the tenant, you do not get to negotiate the lease as well. It needs to be part of your entire contract. The one thing I don't think I've personally seen it, but we've heard about that landlords are sometimes very frustrated and are retaliating against homeowners. Everything from tenants, from turning off the utilities, lockouts, removing their personal belongings, all of those sort of things now face a $1,000 to $2,500 additional fund, including that would be added on top of whatever losses you've already cost them. You broke their grandma's vase when you were moving it, when you shouldn't have been moving it, or you turned off the utilities, and somebody who uses oxygen didn't have power to. So on top of it, there are penalties now for retaliating against the person who cannot pay rent while this protections, the C.A.R Protection Act, is in effect. The CDC eviction moratorium order is saying that it will expire 12/31/20. You will be able to start proceeds, like if you have somebody now who should be starting an eviction order, you can start it, but you can't remove them before the closing of the moratorium. So even if you were successful at serving them notices and all that sort of thing, they do not have to be out before 12/31/20 this year. And I'm guessing it's going to be longer than that. I'm thinking we're going to get a first quarter extension, but that's just me. That's just my best guess. But I see a lot of nodding. So federal agencies are all preventing evictions on any home with an FHA, VA, We're talking about I'm sorry, down to the last one, the other eviction moratorium. They're also saying that some city and counties have less stringent rules than the C.A.R. Act. Some may have more stringent rules, meaning of what you can't do to a tenant at this time. C.A.R. said to be sure to tell you that whichever one offers the most protection is the one. So you don't get to pick the lesser one just because it's to your benefit. If you have a conflicting law in your own county or city, the one that is the most strict is the one that should be followed. Okay, and I did it in an hour and 12 minutes, folks. We did have it on Veterans Day. I'll take your questions now. For those of you who feel like you can't stay with us or have had enough of me, feel free to step aside, but I'm wanting to take questions.
This deck is available. If anybody wants it, you can put your email in the chat and we'll make sure we get it sent out to you. But I mean, it has a lot of useful information. It just gives an overview, but it's enough overview for you to get some information and then have the correct information to be able to research. So
before too many of you get away and before I take questions, we are absent next week because it's the day before Thanksgiving. So we're going to be down next week, and we will not be back until the week after Thanksgiving. And
Yep.
then new forms will be released by December 9th, and we will be back on the 16th with all your new forms as well. But after that, and then we have already decided to take off the 23rd and 30th of December because we'll all be rolling into the Christmas season by then. So what's your questions? Thoughts?
I'm just looking through the chats as well, see if I can see anything.
I hope you remember that we are offering you free porch notaries. That's my personal gift to my territory. We're doing a lot of porch notaries, so at no charge, whether it's my transaction or not. So feel free to reach out to me or Tommy, and we'll get you hooked up with.
No loan docs, but just regular notaries.
No loan docs because those require.
Yeah, everybody has the ability to unmute themselves. If you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask. And let's see. I don't see any questions in the chat, just people requesting the doc. So
Marie's got a question coming in.
She said, can you evict for being being in breach of contract for other than non-payment?
There are just I mentioned to you that there are X number of legitimate just cause rules that came into place last year, in the very last year of our rules. There are 11 fault and 4 no fault just cause rules. You can pull those up very easily by Googling, and those, and yes, you can sell your property. There are some no fault ones. Again, in the interest of fair housing and how expensive it is to live in America or California in specific, they are trying to eliminate situations where you just don't like them. If there's not a legitimate reason, then, or you're not selling or have one of the more personal reasons.
And just know that all of those just causes could not work in your favor during this time frame, ultimately, if they chose to take that path, right? There's always a way of trying to get them out. It's not always the most cost-effective way, but you know, if you have somebody that wants to sell a property, probably, I mean, obviously you ask the tenants first if they're willing to move with that in notion, but if that's not the case, then you offer up, you know, financial ability for them to move. You know, hey, we're willing to give you moving expenses, your deposit back, et cetera, in hopes that then they agree to that, right? But
$5,000
it comes down to them finding a place to move to.
Somebody out, and you could still negotiate the deposit and all that. But we had deals failing at the beginning of the year because of tenants in where I had to legitimately say, you could be 2 years waiting to get these people out, and $8,000 was looked into at that point.
Right.
Anybody else have a question for us? This class is available as all our classes on an individual basis or for your groups or your office meetings. We also take one-on-one calls depending on your situation, of course.
Hey, Mary Jane and Tommy, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys hosting this. And I know there's a number of people in there that are looking forward to receiving the slides. And then I've got requests for the recording as well. So appreciate you hosting. And thank you. Cheers. Great job.
Thank you, Tracy. We're happy to have you.
So I will render the recording. The recording will be put on my Facebook page, which is Tommy for Title. So facebook.com/Tommy, the number 4 title. And that will be
If you send us a request, we'll send it.
posted there, or send me a request and I'll send you the direct link. If you put your email in the chat here, I will email you out the deck as well right away here as soon as the Zoom ends.
I want to give a shout out to Sam. Thank you again for speaking for those TCs who might have joined us today and found that news surprising.
Happy to help. Let me know if there's anything else I can answer any questions for.
Any last thoughts for us, Sam? Anything strike you today?
I agree with you about the solar. Definitely agree with disclose. The other issue I'm seeing a lot of is almost everything in California is held in some form of a trust. Remember, per RPA 19, that you need to be providing to escrow and the other party proof of that signing authorization, be it the LLC, be it trust, be it a power of attorney, be it probate, whatever. And that actually now is being updated on the new notice to perform that will come out next month. And it will delay your escrow and it will buy more time on contingencies. So that's a conversation you need to have as soon as anybody's signing on anything that is not in their own name.
As backed up as the lenders are, the solars are causing more delays right now. At least there's somebody to yell at the lender's office. The solar companies are just a brick wall of cooperation. I'll bet they turn up on our next laws of people that need to have to answer and say they've heard you and reply in a certain amount of time.
Mary Jane.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, I have a client that's going to buy a house and she's sold her house and she's over 55. She sold her house in the LA County and now she wants to buy here. Now, which tax law applies, like 60 or 19 or the new one if she waits till after April?
She's stuck with one of the other provisions until this one takes in, because those first two are going to sunset at the same time this one rolls up. Many counties are participating in this already, and we're happy to hook you up with the ones that are. Most of the big counties are.
She's going to buy in Temecula, Marietta,
Yeah,
or Menifee.
they accept Prop 90. What county is she selling in?
She already sold in LA.
Yeah, you're good.
So which applies? I mean, does she wait till after April? Because if she buys a new house, that would be okay.
No,
Well, she's taking the 55 and over. Is that correct? She's
Yes.
a senior?
Yes.
But it wouldn't really matter. I mean, she can do both because the other one will supersede anyway. So even if they did a Prop 60 or a Prop 90 transfer of tax rate, once 19 kicks in, it'll allow her to do that 2 more times in her lifetime.
Oh, okay. All right. She'll be happy because she was very concerned about the taxes.
But know that that's not a guarantee. You have to file for it.
Yeah.
Right? So there's documents that you have to fill out and submit to the county, and then they have to process it. and ensure that, yes, she is capable of taking that, getting that discount. So, I mean, there's a process. It's not going to be done during the buy. It's
No,
going to
I
be done
know.
after the close.
I think it's a 2-year on the 60 and 90, right? Is the limit?
Yeah, it's still within 2 years. You can claim it within 2 years.
So that 2 years goes by is like nothing now. It was 2 years was a lifetime when I was a kid. Now it's like
Right.
5 minutes. So
It's nothing is right.
yeah.
Thank you guys. I love your classes. It's so informative and scary sometimes. I'm like, oh my God. Bad news sometimes.
I thought this was a good group of laws given, cleanup laws and things given what we've seen worse.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mary Jane.
They did push
Tommy.
the new contract that we were supposed to get this year into next year and maybe the year after that. So depending on how long we go into this next year. So thank goodness we're all not learning a new contract right now as well. All of us who have to teach were prepared for that and had already read all the red line things and were prepared for that. But that was just good thinking not to bring that out this year. So we are, whether it's next year at the end of next year or the year after, we are getting a contract where basically the big changes are they're grouping things in a much more thorough way. Yeah, all contingencies will be together, all costs will be together. Those sort of things. I won't even get into why I think it's where it's going to be a problem. We'll get to it when we get to it. But thankfully, we don't have that problem this year.
All right. Thank you.
Of course.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. I did jot down everybody's email that was in the chat, so I will send those out. If you do not get an email from me with the rendering of this by this afternoon, please reach out to me directly. My contact is at Tommy, the number 4 title.com.